Hello students, this is Dr. M. Bhushanam, Assistant Professor in Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Bengaluru. Hope all is well. Take care of your good health during this pandemic time, students. Today we shall learn another topic of organic evolution, that is, evidences of organic evolution. And in this unit, we shall learn fossils or paleontological evidences as direct evidences of organic evolution. The objective of the study is to learn the role of various types of fossils in the organic evolution. The content includes evidences of organic evolution, and in this, the first type, paleontological evidences, that is, fossils. Well, Earth is the only planet where life exists. It has many kinds of living beings, ranging from microscopic size, that includes microbes, to the gigantic size that includes trees, whales, elephants, etc. In simple, life forms, when we look at, it ranges from simpler forms to the complex forms. It is believed that all the living organisms are not formed at the same time on this Mother Earth. That is, all the living organisms got gradually changed or evolved from one form to another form, that is, from simpler form to the complex ancestral forms, then to the present organisms what we see in the earth. Remember, these gradual changes that took place in the organism took millions and millions of years for the living organisms to develop this complexity. Then what is the proof or evidence to say that these present complex organisms are evolved or formed from the past simpler organisms? The answer is all living organisms exhibiting a common or similar features both in their structure, that is structural organization, and the life processes. In simple, I can say that all these complex organisms that got evolved today from their simpler ancestral forms would have had some similarities pertaining to their structural organization and the body functions. So similarities, which otherwise means that it refers to the basic structure of the cell organelles, the metabolic activities like digestion, respiration, reproduction, excretion, growth, etc. So these similarities among living organisms indicates that all of them have evolved from some common or single ancestor. This type of evolution, where a single ancestor forms many complex present day life, is called as monophyletic evolution. Mono means single. So single ancestor given rise to many different forms of living organisms that are very complex at present days. So this is what we call it as monophyletic evolution. The process of evolution takes place with the gradual modifications or adaptations. Then it relates even with the natural selection process, which took over 1.5 millions of years on this earth. So this gradual change in the complexity of the organisms that we find today, in the characters related to physiological activities as well as their structural organization together, is what exactly we call it as the organic evolution. So organic evolution refers to slow changes or gradual changes that happens in the organisms. It is technically, scientifically we call it as descent with the modification, or simply we call it as the gradual change. The theory of organic evolution of the present life on the earth requires an evidence or proof that showed or that should be convincing to say that the gradual change has taken place to develop this complexity. There are different evidences which are convincing in the process of evolution. It includes the examples like morphological similarities, evidences, then comparative anatomical evidences, as what we find in the top left side of the first diagram, where the anatomical, to say the internal structural organization of the organs, that gives a kind of evidence. Here when we look at the forelimbs of all the organisms of higher vertebrates, when we look at it, consists of the upper part of the limb made up of single bone, the lower part of the limb made up of two bones, and further it is attached with the many number of digits in the form of phalanges or phalangeal bones. And forelimbs are modified for the function. Some are used for grasping the food, and some way the forelimbs are used for the locomotion, and somewhere we make use it for the other purposes. That is one side. The other examples of anatomical variation is we have different types of structures but performing the same function, like wing of bat, wing of bird, wing of insect. They structurally differ, but the function remains same. That is one kind of anatomical evidence. Then we have embryological evidences, where you find the first stage of development of all the vertebrate classes. When we look at a fish, reptile, bird, and even human beings, everywhere we find in their early embryonic state presence of gill slits. So gills are present for the respiration, because we have a amniotic fluid, a liquid medium in which the respiration has to take place, where gills are supportive. Then we all have tail developed. So this is one evidence of evolution, that we are developed from the pre-ancestral forms. Then the fossil evidences, where we do have they are the direct evidences. Down when you look at towards left side, you have the skeleton of endoskeleton of dinosaurs, and towards the right side we have the picture depicting the connecting link, that is Archaeopteryx bird, which connects the characters of both reptiles and birds. So these are all evidences that supports the process of evolution. Like this, we have taxonomical evidences, then cytological evidences, physiological evidences, genetic evidences, etc. So all these evidences are helpful to say that the process of organic evolution has taken place on the earth. Among these types of evidences, the paleontological evidences form the direct evidences because they are directly taken, the organisms which were living in the past time or past periods got embedded after their death into the layers of the earth, and when we dig out, we get the organisms as the direct supportive structures. So they form the direct evidences here. It includes the fossils mainly here. So the reservoirs of the past organisms in the earth are nothing but these fossils. So they are present in the Mother Earth in different layers. When you look at the down diagram or the upper diagrams, that is the section of the earth where you find at different layers you find the organisms which are dead and got embedded in the layers. So when we look at the earth, it shows many layers of strata. The major layers are outer crust and middle mantle, inner core. The outer crust alone, the outer upper part alone, when we look at, its thickness varies from 5 miles to 25 miles thickness. So at some place it will be of 5 miles and some place it will be ranging to 25 miles of thickness. So it is richly provided with the minerals like aluminium, iron, magnesium salts, silicon salts, etc. Students, remember here, the present earth strata have been subjected to too many changes in the course of evolution. So these changes are collectively called as revolutions. There are many revolutions that have happened on the earth, like heavy uncontrolled wind, uncontrolled frost rains, then uncontrolled earthquakes, etc. So the changes that took place in life processes are seen in the past life of the organisms. So during these revolutionary changes, many ancient organisms which could not bear or which could not adapt to these changes died in mass. We call it as mass death, mass extinction of organisms that they buried. After they died, they just occupied a layer of the earth, and later the upper layers of the earth got formed, and these dead organisms remained in that particular layer. So severe winds, frosts, they covered them after their death, and they kept in their deeper layers of the earth as dead organisms. So they got preserved now as fossils in these strata layers or layers of the rock or the earth. Until and unless we dig them from these deeper layers of the earth, we won't be knowing about them. And they form structures inside referred as fossils. Geologically, the records of rocks or age of rocks is estimated through the presence of the type of fossils in it or the type of fossils available in it. So this is called as biostratification. So based on the type of fossils present in the layer of the earth, we give the age of the layer of the rock or the earth. So we call it as biostratification. And rocks could be generally are of 3 types, namely sedimentary rocks, igneous rocks, and metamorphic rocks. Of all these 3 types, we find more of fossils in the layers of sedimentary rocks. So common distribution of fossils, when we look at, it is in the sedimentary rocks only. So what are fossils? The actual topic that we are coming on to. They are the remains of organisms that lived in the past or ancient time. they need to be dug from the earth crust layers or the strata layers. They may be the parts or remains of dead organisms, either in their full or entire body form, or sometimes it could be some parts of the body of the organisms, or it could be traces of the fossils. So this forms of fossils are the direct evidences of organic evolution. The word fossil is derived from the Latin word fossilis, fossilium and fodere. All these three words refers to the meaning of to dig up. We need to dig the earth to take this internally embedded organisms, dead organisms out. Hence it is called as fossil. Let's now understand how these fossils are. The fossils could be either the complete body form of the dead animal, or it could be in the traces. Let's now understand the methods of fossilization. Fossilization refers to the process of formation of fossil. Otherwise, it means to a process of past living organisms becoming a fossil. In simple, we can write saying that fossil is formation of fossils is called as fossilization process. So down in the picture we can find an arthropod embedded in the rock rich with the oil. We call it as asphalts. Asphalts are nothing but oil rich soil. In that it got embedded. The best example of fossilization. Now, when an organism like an ancient antelope or dinosaur dies in a plain area, generally the body of the organism will be fed by or eaten by the decomposers or the scavengers, where the soft parts are totally been eaten away by these organisms, leaving behind only the hard parts like bones. We also find any organisms like dogs or any other birds, when they die on the roadsides or in a plain, you find the soft parts getting decomposed, but the hard bones are left like that. They get scattered sometimes. In later days, these bones also can be converted into nutrient forms, and they are added to the soil. Overall, this process is called as decomposition process. This happens when the dead organisms are exposed to the oxidizing organisms or decomposing organisms of the air. So, such organisms may not form fossils very promptly. There are different methods by which this fossilization can take place. Method 1 is fossilization through waterborne sedimentation burial. Here what happens is that sometimes when these animals nearer to a sand range or sometimes a stream bed, the river bed, they become, after their death, they become buried in the sediment of the soil or rock or the water. Here, the soft body of the organisms are decomposed by the decomposers, whereas the hard parts like bones, teeth, etc. are replaced by minerals that are present in the surrounding environment, like the water medium or the rock medium or the clay medium, etc. So, during millions of years of time, the hard bone parts or teeth parts will be replaced by the mineral part, mineral matter in that bed. So when we dug up the remnants or the remains of the dead organisms later, after millions of years, the remains of dead organisms are seen embedded inside the layers of the earth in the form of fossils. This process is called as fossilization through the waterborne sedimentation burial. Students, remember here, after the death of the organism, the decomposed will act upon the soft body parts, whereas the hard body parts are covered over by the sediment of either the sand or of the bed of clay or of the rock, and it forms the fossil there. Okay, the original organisms, hard parts are replaced by the mineral content. It forms the sediment there. So this, when we dug up after millions of years, it may form the fossil. This fossil formation is called fossilization through waterborne sedimentation burial, because the mineral rich water is bringing about the formation of fossils here. So that's about the first method of formation of fossils. Students, remember, in this method of fossilization through waterborne sediments, fragments of the past organisms like traces, molds, then cars, footprints, impressions, etc. gets formed in the form of fossils here. So they are all the examples of altered fossils, meaning to say they are not of the original structure, they are into a changed form. So we call them as alter forms. Here are all the best examples related to the fossils of traces or fragments. The next method is fossilization through ice and snow burial method. So during exceptionally favorable conditions, when an organism dies, the entire organism may get preserved in a good condition in a snow or ice or glacier region. Such organisms will later will be covered with the snow. When we dug up this snow sediment, we can find a fossil in its entire form. The complete form of the organism is seen. So remember here, even the finer details of these soft parts of the fossil organism is also well studied in this type of fossilization. So this method is also called as unaltered fossil formation, because nothing is getting changed. Here down in the picture, the human being has died in years of time back in the snow, and there is no ultimate changes in their body features. The finer details of the soft parts can be studied. So that good is the preservation here. So this kind of fossils are called as unaltered fossils, meaning to say they remain in their original form for a longer time. Well, student, here in cold zones of Arctic and Antarctica areas, entire body of the past organisms or ancient organisms gets frozen, which is also called as body fossil. So when an entire organism in the frozen state is available as fossil, we call it as body fossil because the entire organism is available here and it gets preserved in the ice. It is a stage similar to that of deep freezing, what we make use in our refrigerators in day-to-day life, where we store the meat, okay, especially the meat content. The freshness of the dead body remains here for thousands of years, and that is, the flesh and bones remains unchanged. The reason for this freshness of the soft parts is that the decomposing microorganisms fail to work at the low temperatures. So they will not act upon the decomposition of the body here. This method of fossilization is hence called as fossilization through the ice and snow sedimentation burial. Here is an example referred as woolly mammoth from Siberia. Woolly refers to the presence of wool-like structure. Mammoth refers to an elephant species. So woolly mammoths refers to an elephant species with the body covered with the thick wool that you can see in the diagram down. This woolly body of a body cover of the elephant is an adaptation to the cold environment in snow or glacier regions. But when the due course of evolution, when the revolution process, the changes in the environment has taken place, these animals died as they could not adapt to the strategies of the revolutions of the ancient time. Students, scientists who work on fossils are called as paleontologists. And this paleontologists, when they dug out this fossil, they could find that it was an entirely different kind of elephant species what they could find. So which is extinct now. So this was dug out in Siberia in 1901. So thousands of years back, these organisms when were living, but now they are not. They are in the extinct forms. Not even a single organism representative is seen. These fossils, when we look at, it was in a very fresh condition. The condition is so much that even the flesh of these organisms could be fed to a dog even after thousands of years of freezing. So that was the condition related to the woolly mammoths. The next method of fossilization is fossil formation through petroleum springs and asphalts. Students, we know that crude oil is dug out of the oil wells. We also call it as oil springs. In simple, wells filled with the crude oil. Then we have another word called asphalts, or nothing but the oil-rich saturated soil. So down is the picture representing asphalt, the oil-rich soil. A common condition that we can find in the surrounding areas of oil wells is the asphalt condition. So we have oil wells. The surrounding environment of these oil wells will be asphalts. Example of today's asphalts, if we wanted to imagine, it could be the areas nearer to the garages where you find oil saturated soil spilled around. So when an organism gets trapped in this oil wells or asphalts, the oil-rich soil and the oil tanks or wells makes the organism to get entangled within. So organism dies, becomes entombed, mean to say the dead organism gets fixed into that particular content and remains as unaltered fossils or even sometimes altered fossils. So that's the importance of this particular method. Examples or remains of the extinct insects, dinosaurs, birds and small mammals examples were in the place called Rancho La Brea of Los Angeles. So where you find asphalt-rich bed filled with the remains of the fossil forms of the altered and unaltered type. The next method of fossil formation is fossilization through resins and ambers. Students, we find many trees in a forest which secretes a type of secretion which we call it as resins or gums, gummy sticky material. Example is the conifer trees of Baltic coast of 30 million years ago. When small insects get trapped in this resin materials, that is the semi-liquid material, later upon drying, the resins becomes a hard material now called as amber. So when it is semi-solid or liquid material, we call it as a resin. After the complete drying, we call the same component as amber. Both the resins and amber will contain the presence of dead organisms which are minute insects or other invertebrates also. So it is a good preservation process of the dead organisms. Students, remember here the minute histological details or fine details of the fossils can be studied very well in this particular type of fossils that are formed. Here too both altered and unaltered fossils can be seen. Down is a picture. You can find that yellow color content is the amber where the entombed insects are seen. Towards the right side you find in the first diagram where the resins are getting formed out and into which the insect gets visited, then becomes hard to form the amber, and the amber shows the presence of the content of it. So even plant parts can be seen as the preserved fossils. The next method of fossilization through salt-rich marine waters. Students, we know that salt is a very good preservant. We preserve the pickles in the salt, then we restore it for years of time. There's salting of the dry fishes or seafood, which also could be preserved for a longer time. These are all the good methods of preservation. Similarly, the salt-rich marine waters can be used as good preservatives of the dead organisms in the altered and unaltered forms of the fossils. So when these dead organisms sink to the bottom of the sea of salt-rich waters, they form the fossils. Down is a fish variety which shows the formation of the fossil with the help of the salt-rich marine waters. Then what are the necessary conditions required for the fossil formation? Number one, usually the hard parts of the organisms are required. Number two, immediate burial of the dead organisms need to be done. Number three, watery place with good mineral content or water or soil rich with the mineral content should be available. Number four, the sedimentary rocks. So sedimentary rocks are the common type of rocks where we find the formation of fossils in a huge manner. So the immediate burial stops here the action of decomposing bacteria on the dead organism and prevents the organism's oxidation or decomposition process. Then we also have studied that there is a requirement of covering of the organism with the soil or immediate burial process. It includes the miring or plunging into mud or sedimentation of rocks. Something should cover the organism immediately after its death. So the dead organisms are immediately need to be buried by the miring soil or clay or even by some sand. It is to prevent the process of oxidation and decomposition. Example is large mammals are excavated in the areas of Rancho La Brea, Los Angeles, California regions, then Irish deer in Island region. Down is a picture that depicts how this immediate burial is a necessary factor for the process of formation of the fossil. In the extreme left side, we find the diagram of the fish, where the fish after its death on the rock, it will be covered over by the layers of the rock of sedimentation, and you find soft parts decomposed and hard parts left, which forms the fossil. So it is an entire fossil is getting formed here. Whereas towards the entire part of the hard structures. Towards the right side, the same process in the water, where the fragmentation of the fossils are seen. So we call it as trace fossils. One side is body fossil, the other side is the trace fossil. Let's now understand few concepts related to the paleontological processes. Number one, the word paleontology refers to the study that deals with the fossils, where paleon refers to old. The father of paleontology is Leonard da Vinci. So down to the left side is the pic representing the father of paleontology. The father of modern paleontology is Baron Georges Cuvier. So towards the right side you find the pic referring to him. What is the importance of these fossils? Why do we need to study them? When we look at, remember, fossils are the direct evidences of organic evolution or the theory of organic evolution. We know simpler forms of organisms got evolved into complex forms. To understand this concept, we have the organisms of connecting links, ancestral forms available in the form of fossils in the deeper sedimentary rock areas. As per biostratification process, we know that the older rocks contain simple forms or ancestral forms, and new rocks will contain at the top layers complex forms or near ancestral forms of the organisms. So down is a picture representing the woolly mammoth, the direct evidence of the organic evolution. These organisms are not there at present. So it helps us to know that the evolution process has taken place. Next importance is fossils are the stratigraphic indicators, which means fossils give a clue to the age of the rocks in which they are. Deeper layers of the strata is older and contain very simple forms. The upper layers of the strata is of newer and contain complex forms. So fossil organisms' location in a particular strata gives the age of the layer of the rock. So this we call it as biostratification. Bio means living, mean to say organism, it refers to. Stratification refers to the layers of the earth. So based on the type of the organism or fossil available, we can predict the age of the rock or the earth.